Welcome back to Abby's Mafia Romance. Here is your next story.
The sting in my palm was nothing compared to the cold vacuum in my chest. I had just slapped the most dangerous man in Asia, and all he did was adjust his silk tie as if I were a minor inconvenience. I wanted him to see the bruises on my ribs, the marks left by the men who tried to break me, but his eyes remained as flat as a frozen lake. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive into the fire, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our dark romance family stretch across cities and time zones. Every click helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and let's see just how far Se-Hwan is willing to go for the woman who dared to strike him. Let's begin. The silence in the private wing of the gallery wasn't just quiet. It was pressurized. A sealed chamber waiting to implode. The slap echoed off the minimalist concrete walls, a sharp, violent punctuation mark that hung in the air between us. My hand was still trembling. Not from fear. I don't do fear. I do assessment. But from the sheer, unadulterated rage vibrating through my bone marrow. Jung Se-Hwan stood perfectly still. He is a man who occupies space with the weight of a collapsing star. He was wearing a charcoal three-piece suit, tailored to within a millimeter of his life, the fabric absorbing the gallery's dim lighting. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just watched me with that terrifying predatory stillness that had earned him the moniker the Silent Fire. "Do you have nothing to say?" I hissed. My voice scraped against my throat, raw from the scream I had swallowed in the alleyway 2 hours ago. He tilted his head, a microscopic movement. "Your hand," he said, his voice a low baritone rumble that I felt in the soles of my feet. "It's shaking." I was cornered, Se-Hwan. I stepped into his personal space. A tactical error with anyone else, but I needed him to smell the blood and grime on my coat. I needed to break that pristine facade. 3 men. Viper Clan tattoos. They knew the route to my studio. They knew about the debt. They knew you. I watched his pupils. They didn't dilate. No physiological response to the threat. He was a statue carved from obsidian. I handled it, I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Because that is what I do. I am the architect. I analyzed the leverage points. I used a palette knife to sever the radial artery of the first man, and I ran. But they touched me. I grabbed the lapels of his expensive jacket, bunching the fabric in my fists. They put their hands on me because they thought you wouldn't care. And looking at you now, I think they were right. I waited for the denial. I waited for the apology. Nothing. He reached up, his leather-gloved hand covering mine on his chest. He didn't push me away. He held my hand there, over his heart. It was beating slow, rhythmic, controlled. "Are you finished?" he asked. The dismissal hit me harder than the slap. I scoffed, a bitter sound, and tried to rip my hand away. "I'm done. I'll clear the debt myself. I don't need a partner who ignores the bruises on his own assets." I turned on my heel, the rubber of my sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. I calculated the distance to the exit, 20 meters. I could be out of the building in 12 seconds. I made it 2 steps. The air shifted behind me. A displacement of atmosphere. Before my brain could signal defensive posture, a hand clamped onto my upper arm. It wasn't rough, but it was absolute. An iron shackle wrapped in cashmere. Se-Hwan spun me around. The momentum slammed my back against the cold, smooth surface of a marble pillar. The impact knocked the breath out of me, flaring the pain in my bruised ribs. But the adrenaline spiked instantly. He was there. Everywhere. He pinned me, his body a wall of heat pressing against my shivering form. His face was inches from mine. The indifference was gone. In its place was a focused intensity so sharp it felt like a blade against my throat. He smelled of ozone, burnt copper, and gasoline. "Look," he commanded. He didn't look at me. He pulled a slim, black glass device from his breast pocket and held it up to my eye level. The screen flickered to life. It was a live feed, high-definition thermal imaging from a drone hovering 500 feet in the air. I blinked, my analyst brain instantly processing the data. It was an aerial view of the Incheon warehouse district. Sector 4. The Viper Clan's distribution hub. But the geometry was wrong. The structures were collapsing. Bright white-hot blooms of thermal energy were consuming the screen. Heat signatures of men were scrambling, fleeing, only to be swallowed by the wash of white. That's... I stuttered, my eyes widening. That's their headquarters, was, Se-Hwan corrected. He tapped the screen. The view switched to a ground-level camera. The visual was chaotic, smoke, debris, and the unmistakable wreckage of the black SUV that had cornered me earlier that evening. It was a twisted husk of metal, burning in the center of the street. My breath caught. I looked up at him, my anger colliding with confusion. When? The moment the first man grabbed your arm, Se-Hwan said. His eyes finally locked onto mine, and the intensity in them made my knees weak. I have a tracker in your watch. I saw your heart rate spike. I saw the location. But... You were here, I whispered. You were at the Gala. My body was here, he murmured, leaning closer, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. My orders were there. He shifted his grip, his hand sliding from my arm to cup my jaw. His thumb grazed my cheekbone, right where a faint bruise was beginning to purple. The touch was possessive, terrifyingly tender. You think I ignored your bruises? I don't waste time on pity. By the time you walked into this room, the men who touched you no longer had names or lives. I burned the city for you. Now, you belong to the fire. The transition from the gallery to the street was a masterclass in kinetic geometry. Se-Hyun didn't whistle, and he didn't wave. He simply turned, his hand sliding from my jaw to the small of my back, a point of contact that felt less like support and more like a guidance system locking onto a target. 6 men materialized from the shadows of the corridor. They weren't the bulky, neckless thugs the Viper clan employed. These men were wraiths. Dressed in matte black tactical suits that absorbed the light, they moved in a tight diamond formation, weapons concealed but palpable in their posture. As an analyst, I couldn't help but catalog the details. No visible earpieces. They were using bone conduction comms. Their eyes scanned the periphery and overlapping sectors of fire. This wasn't security. This was a Tier 1 extraction team. Move, Se-Hwan said. A single syllable that carried the weight of a command. We swept through the service exit and into the humid Seoul night. The air smelled different here, acrid. The wind carried the faint, metallic tang of smoke from 5 miles away. The fire he had started. A convoy of black Maybachs idled at the curb, engines purring with a subsonic frequency that vibrated in my chest. Se-Hwan's security detail opened the rear door of the lead vehicle. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, calculating the variables. Run, 0% success rate. Scream, pointless. I slid onto the back seat. The leather was cool, buttery soft, and smelled of money. Se-Hwan followed, sealing us inside. The door closed with a heavy, pressurized thud, instantly severing us from the world. The silence was absolute. It was a vacuum. A high-tech coffin lined with walnut trim and ambient lighting. As the car accelerated, merging seamlessly into traffic, the sensory details overwhelmed me. The interior didn't smell like a car. It smelled of him. Sandalwood, expensive scotch, and the faint, static charge of ozone radiating from the tablet that still rested on the console between us. I looked out the tinted window. The city passed in a blur of neon and shadow. Somewhere out there, men were burning because they had bruised me. A normal woman might feel protected. I felt cornered. Stop analyzing the route, Se-Hwan said, not looking up from his phone. We aren't going to your apartment. My spine stiffened. My contract stipulates that my private residence is off limits. I pay my debt, I do the restoration work, I go home. That was the deal. The deal changed when you became a target, he replied smoothly. I clenched my fists. The debt. The invisible chain around my neck. It wasn't about gambling or drugs. It was about Elias, my late husband. A man who had the charm of a poet and the survival instincts of a moth. Elias was a courier for the syndicate, a high-level transport for intellectual property. But the package he lost wasn't drugs. It was my code. The God's Eye algorithm I had written during my time in intelligence. I had trusted him to scrub it, to destroy the evidence of my past life. Instead, he tried to sell it to pay off his own bad decisions. He lost the drive, he lost his life, and the syndicate came to me with a bill for $200,000, the estimated value of the lost data. I wasn't just paying off money, I was paying penance for trusting the wrong man. "I can handle the Viper clan," I said, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "I know their digital infrastructure. I know their weak points." Se-Hwan finally turned to me. In the shifting light of the passing street lamps, his face was a landscape of sharp angles and shadows. He picked up the tablet again and tapped the screen. "You know their weak points?" he asked, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "Look." He handed me the device. I looked down, expecting to see the thermal feed of the fire again. Instead, I saw a cascading waterfall of blue code. It was a blockchain ledger, a live extraction feed. My eyes widened. I recognized the hash keys. This is their offshore crypto liquidity. "The Viper clan operates on fear and Bitcoin," Se-Hwan said, his voice dropping to that lethal quiet register. "I burned their physical headquarters to send a message, but while they were watching the fire, I drained their wallets." He swiped the screen. The balance at the bottom hit zero. $30 million, I whispered. "Gone in 6 minutes. I don't just burn buildings, Makeda. I erase legacies." He took the tablet back, his fingers brushing against mine. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up my arm that had nothing to do with fear. "You think you're working off a debt? You're wasting your talent fixing old paintings in a dusty studio. I didn't extract you to be a victim. I extracted you because you're the only person in this city who understands the code I just used." He leaned back, watching me. "I want the architect, not the widow." The car took a sharp turn, banking onto the private highway leading toward the hills, toward the fortress districts where the untouchables lived. My mind raced. He knew. He knew the code was mine. He knew Elias didn't write it, which meant he knew exactly how dangerous I could be. I shifted in my seat, my hand drifting casually toward the door panel. I needed to know if the child locks were engaged. It was a reflex, a data point. If I could open the door, I had a 0.01% chance of tuck and roll survival at this speed. If it was locked, I was a prisoner. My fingers brushed the chrome handle. Suddenly, Se-Hwan moved. He didn't grab me. He simply leaned across the center console, invading my personal space until his face was inches from mine. The smell of sandalwood filled my lungs, intoxicating and suffocating all at once. His presence was so heavy it felt like gravity had shifted. He looked at my hand on the door handle, then up into my eyes. His gaze was dark, stripping away every layer of defense I had built over the last 3 years. "Stop looking for exits, Makeda," he whispered. His breath ghosted over my lips. "You're an analyst. Calculate the odds. We are doing 70 miles per hour on a suspended bridge. The doors are reinforced steel. The glass is bulletproof." He reached out, his hand covering mine on the handle, pinning it there. His grip was warm, firm, and inescapable. "There is no version of tonight where you run," he said, the promise dark and absolute in his voice. "There is no version of tonight where you sleep anywhere but my bed." The car slowed as we approached the massive iron gates of his estate. I looked at him, breathless, terrified and furious. And beneath it all, the architect in me acknowledged the truth. Checkmate. The car didn't stop at a house. It stopped at a fortress. Jung Se-Hwan's estate wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for siege warfare. As the Maybach purred through the third set of reinforced steel gates, I wasn't admiring the landscaping. I was counting the blind spots. There were none. "LiDAR sensors on the perimeter," I noted quietly, my eyes scanning the brutalist concrete walls that rose out of the dark hillside like the teeth of a buried giant. Thermal imaging every 50 feet. Biometric locks on the service entrances. I turned to Se-Hwan. "You don't live in a home. You live in a panic room." "I live in a reality you are just beginning to understand," he replied, the car finally coming to a halt in an underground receiving bay that looked more like a sterile hangar than a garage. The doors opened. The air here was filtered, scrubbed clean of the city's grit, smelling of polished epoxy and cold air conditioning. We stepped out, and immediately, the calm fractured. A set of double doors at the far end of the bay burst open. 3 men in lab coats ran out, followed by a woman holding a tablet that was screaming with a high-pitched red alert klaxon. "Sir," the woman shouted, ignoring the security protocol to bow. "The firewall is hemorrhaging. It's a cascading brute force attack on the logistics server. We can't isolate the packets. It's eating through the encryption." Se-Hwan didn't panic. He didn't even quicken his pace. He just walked toward them, a shark gliding through water. "Cut the hard line." "We tried." The tech screamed, panic cracking her voice. "It's embedded in the BIOS. If we cut the power, the failsafe wipes the drives. We lose the shipment manifest for the entire Pacific Rim." I stopped. My ears pricked up. I knew that sound, not the alarm, the rhythm of the code scrolling on the massive monitor mounted on the wall. It wasn't a standard brute force. It was a Hydra loop. A piece of nasty malware I had seen used by Russian intelligence 3 years ago. Se-Hwan stopped in front of his team. His silence was more terrifying than their shouting. He was watching his empire crumble in real time, his face an impassive mask. I looked at the scrolling code. I looked at the sweating technicians who were typing commands that I knew would fail. I sighed. Amateurs. I walked past Se-Hwan. "Step away from the terminal," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The lead tech blinked at me, a woman in a bloodied trench coat and cheap sneakers. "Who the hell are you?" I said, "Move." I shoved him aside with my hip, ignoring the flare of pain in my bruised ribs. My fingers hit the mechanical keyboard. It was heavy, responsive. I didn't think. I flowed. I accessed the command line, bypassing the GUI entirely. "It's a Hydra 6 protocol," I said, my eyes darting across the syntax. "You're trying to build a wall, but the water is already inside. You don't block it. You drown it." I typed a counterscript, a suicide pill for the server that would trick the malware into attacking itself. Enter. Execute. Purge. I hit the final key with a sharp clack. The red lights on the wall turned green. The screaming alarm died instantly. The scrolling code froze, then dissolved into a simple, blinking cursor. System secure. I exhaled, stepping back from the console. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from the rush. The old rush. The architect was awake. I turned around to find the entire room staring at me. The technicians looked like they had seen a ghost, but I only looked at Se-Hwan. He stood 5 feet away, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't surprised. He looked satisfied, like he had just watched a thoroughbred run its first lap. "The logic was sound," he said, his voice void of praise but heavy with acknowledgement. "But your syntax is aggressive. Efficiency usually is," I countered, crossing my arms to hide the tremble in my fingers. "Come," he commanded. He turned and walked toward the elevator, not waiting to see if I followed. He knew I would. His office was the penthouse. It was a glass box suspended over the city, a transparent eye in the sky. There was no mahogany, no old books, no warmth, just chrome, black glass, and the sprawling, glittering nervous system of Seoul laid out beneath us. He walked to a sleek black desk that seemed to float in the center of the room and tapped a surface. A hologram flickered to life. A document. "Sit," he said. I remained standing. I prefer to stand when I'm being threatened. "You aren't being threatened, Makeda. You are being acquired." He swiped his hand, and the document rotated to face me. Your debt to the syndicate is $200,000, plus interest. The Viper clan was going to take it in organs and servitude. He pressed a button. The number on the document turned to 0. Paid, he said, in full. My breath hitched. The weight that had been crushing my chest for 3 years. Gone? Just like that? What do you want? I whispered. Men like you don't give gifts. I want the architect, he said, walking around the desk. He moved with a predatory grace, closing the distance between us until I had to tilt my head back to look him in the eye. I need a shadow analyst, someone who can see the threats I miss, someone who can kill a server with a keystroke. He gestured to the glass walls. You will live here. You will work for me. You will act as my partner in public and my weapon in private. In exchange, you are free of the debt, and you are under my protection. I can't, I said, my voice trembling. You don't understand, Se-Hwan. I'm cursed. I took a step back, hitting the cold glass of the window. Everyone I get close to dies. Elias thought he could handle the game, and it killed him. The Viper clan touched me and they burned. If I stay here, if I work for you, the fire will come for you too. I looked at him, pleading with him to understand the danger I represented. I am a walking jagged edge. I destroy everything I touch. Se-Hwan stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, his gaze traveling from my messy hair to my bruised cheek, down to my scuffed sneakers, and back to my eyes. He stepped into my space, invading it completely. He placed a hand on the glass on either side of my head, trapping me. He smelled of power and ozone. You think you are the danger? He asked, his voice low and mocking. You think a little bad luck and some dead criminals scare me? He leaned down, his lips inches from mine. I am the dragon of Seoul, Makeda. I am the reason the city sleeps with one eye open. I don't fear the fire, I am the furnace. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy black fountain pen. He held it out to me. Death works for me. You aren't cursed. You were just working for the wrong monster. He pressed the pen into my hand. His fingers were hot against my cold skin. Sign the papers. Become the architect again. Or walk out that door and let the wolves have you. But know this. If you sign, you are mine. Mind, body, and code. I looked at the pen. I looked at the city below, burning with his lights. I looked at the man who promised to be a bigger monster than the ones hunting me. I uncapped the pen. The first thing Se-Hwan did was burn my life. I didn't watch it happen, but I smelled it. The faint, acrid scent of polyester and old denim drifting up from the estate's incinerator. My jeans, my canvas jacket, the sneakers scuffed with the grime of the subway. Everything that tied me to Makeda the art restorer was gone. Contaminated. The head housekeeper, Mrs. O, had said, her face a mask of polite disdain. The master does not allow the scent of failure in the penthouse. I stood in the center of the walk-in closet, a space larger than my entire former apartment. It was filled with rows of garments that cost more than my debt. Silk, cashmere, structured wool. The colors were muted, obsidian, charcoal, blood red. I ran my hand down the sleeve of a black silk evening gown. I didn't feel like Cinderella. I felt like a soldier being issued a new uniform. I pulled the dress off the rack, turning it inside out. I wasn't looking for the label, I was looking for utility. Reinforced seams, I muttered, tracing the stitching. High tensile thread. I checked the thigh slit. It was high, perfect for mobility. I checked the waist. Hidden pocket in the sash, big enough for a ceramic blade or a flash drive. I huffed, a dry, humorless sound. Se-Hwan hadn't bought me a wardrobe. He had curated an arsenal. He didn't want a doll. He wanted a weapon wrapped in velvet. Dinner was a study in acoustic torture. The dining table was a slab of volcanic rock, long enough to land a drone on. Se-Hwan sat at the head. I sat at his right hand. The distance between us was negligible, but the silence was a chasm. The only sounds were the clink of heavy silver against bone china and the low hum of the air filtration system. The plate before me held a Wagyu steak, seared rare. The smell was intoxicating, rich, iron-heavy, primal. It made my mouth water, a traitorous physiological response after 3 years of instant noodles and stale coffee. I cut a piece, conscious of the way the knife slid through the meat like it was butter. I took a bite. The flavor exploded on my tongue, salty and savory, almost overwhelming my senses. I swallowed, and then I felt it. The weight of his gaze. I looked up. Se-Hwan wasn't eating. He was watching my mouth. His elbows were on the table, his hands clasped, his chin resting on his thumbs. His eyes were dark, unblinking, tracking the movement of my throat as I swallowed. He looked hungry, but not for the food. "Is the temperature agreeable?" he asked. The question was mundane, but the tone was interrogative. "It's adequate," I replied, wiping my mouth with a linen napkin that felt like a cloud. "Though the calorie density of this meal is inefficient for a sedentary evening." "You won't be sedentary," he said, finally picking up his fork. "Tomorrow, you start auditing the Hong Kong servers. I want to know where the leaks are." He sliced his meat with surgical precision. "Eat, Makeda. You look like a gust of wind could knock you over." "I don't employ fragile things." I gripped my fork tighter. "I'm not fragile. I'm efficient. There's a difference." "We'll see," he murmured. "Eat." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I took another bite, feeling the golden cage lock tight around me. 3 a.m. The witching hour. The time when ghosts are supposed to walk. In the penthouse, the only ghost was me. The bed Se-Hwan had assigned me was an expanse of Egyptian cotton, but it felt like quicksand. I couldn't sleep. My brain was still wired, buzzing with the transition from survival mode to whatever this was. I slipped out of the room, barefoot. The floor was heated stone, smooth against my soles. I wandered the corridors, avoiding the obvious cameras, though I knew the infrared sensors were tracking my heat signature. I needed to find a blind spot, a place to breathe. I found a set of glass doors at the end of the east wing. They were unlocked. I pushed them open and stepped into a jungle. It was an indoor biosphere, a high-tech winter garden enclosed in a glass dome. The air was humid, smelling of damp earth, jasmine, and ozone. Massive ferns and rare orchids grew in regulated patterns, illuminated by soft bioluminescent mood lighting. In the center was a koi pond, the water black and still. I walked to the edge, crouching down. "Okay," I whispered to the silence. "This is..." Unexpected. Something whirred to my left. I flinched, dropping into a defensive crouch. A small, spider-like robot, no bigger than a dinner plate, crawled out from under a fern. It had a little nozzle on the front and was trying to mist a patch of moss, but one of its legs was stuck on a decorative rock. Its wheels spun helplessly, making a sad, grinding noise. Whir-click. Whir-click. I stared at it. The ruthless dragon of soul had a Roomba for his plants? "You're stuck," I whispered. I reached out, carefully dislodging the rock. The little robot beeped, a cheerful ascending tone, and immediately spun around to resume its duties. But in its enthusiasm, it miscalculated the angle. It spun too fast, and the nozzle sprayed a direct, pressurized mist of water right into my face. I gasped, sputtering, wiping the water from my eyes. The robot paused, as if embarrassed, and beeped a low descending tone. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. The kidnapping, the burning building, the millions of dollars, the deadly tension, and here I was getting facialed by a robotic gardener. A sound bubbled up in my chest. It felt foreign, rusty. I laughed. It started as a snort, then blossomed into a real, genuine laugh. A bright, bell-like sound that echoed off the glass walls. I covered my mouth, shocked by the noise. I hadn't laughed in 3 years. Not since Elias died. "You idiot," I whispered to the robot, wiping a tear from my eye. "Go on. Go water something else." I sat back on my heels, breathing easier. For the first time in forever, the weight on my chest lifted, just an inch. 3 rooms away, in the pitch-black darkness of his private sanctum, Jung Se-Hwan sat motionless in his leather chair. A wall of monitors glowed in front of him, casting a blue pallor over his sharp features. On the center screen, the feed from the biosphere played in high definition. He watched the woman crouched by the pond. He saw the water hit her face. And then, through the high-fidelity audio system, he heard it. The laugh. It wasn't the calculated response of an employee. It wasn't the bitter scoff of a victim. It was pure. It was the sound of a bell ringing in a graveyard. Se-Hwan's hand, resting on the arm of his chair, tightened until the leather groaned. He stopped breathing for 10 seconds. He had expected her to be useful. He had expected her to be dangerous. He hadn't expected her to be this. He rewound the footage. He played the sound again. The laugh. He stared at the screen, at the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way her guard dropped for exactly 3 seconds. Makeda, he whispered, the name tasting like smoke and sugar on his tongue. He reached out, his finger tracing the outline of her face on the screen. The cold indifference in his eyes cracked, replaced by a terrifying, absolute possession. "You have no idea," he murmured to the empty room, "what you've just done." The sky over Seoul didn't just rain, it detonated. The monsoon had hit the peninsula an hour ago, turning the world outside the penthouse glass into a swirling gray vortex. To a civilian, it was a storm. To me, the sound of water hammering against reinforced glass at 70 miles per hour didn't sound like weather. It sounded like shrapnel. Boom. Thunder rattled the floorboards beneath my bare feet. My brain instantly categorized the sound. Low frequency, high yield, distance, less than 1 mile. I wasn't in a luxury apartment anymore. I was back in a safe house in Damascus, waiting for the ceiling to collapse. My breath came in short, jagged gasps. I couldn't stay in the bedroom. The duvet felt like a body bag. I needed visuals. An analyst cannot assess a threat they cannot see. I pushed open the door and walked into the main hall. The penthouse was pitch black, the power flickering in and out as the city grid struggled against the deluge. The lightning was the only strobe, illuminating the room in violent white hot bursts. I wasn't alone. Jung Se-Hwan stood by the north wall, a silhouette carved from the darkness. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand, looking out at the chaos. He didn't turn when I entered. "You're pacing," he said, his voice cutting through the rumble of the thunder. "Your gait is uneven. Adrenaline dump?" "Atmospheric pressure," I lied, my voice tight. I wrapped my arms around myself. "The storm is loud." "Loud?" He turned then. A flash of lightning lit up his face, stark, unsmiling, eyes like pools of ink. "Most women would say it's scary. You look like you're waiting for incoming fire." "Old habits," I whispered. Another crack of thunder shook the building. I flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a tightening of the trapezius muscle. But he saw it. He saw everything. He set his glass down on a side table with a heavy clack and walked toward me. I should have stepped back. I didn't. I was frozen, caught between the memory of war and the reality of the predator in front of me. He stopped 2 feet away. The air between us was charged, heavy with the scent of ozone from the storm and the expensive peat-smoked whiskey on his breath. "You're shaking," he observed. Not a question. A data point. "It's cold," I countered. "No." He reached out. I expected him to touch my face. Instead, his hand ghosted over my left shoulder, his fingers brushing the thin strap of the silk nightgown he had bought me. The silk slipped, just an inch, revealing the mottled, puckered skin just below my collarbone. It was an ugly scar, a starburst of raised tissue where a sniper's round had shattered the scapula 5 years ago. Se-Hwan didn't look at my face. He looked at the ruin of my skin. "This isn't from a fall," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. He traced the edge of the scar with his thumb. His skin was rough, hot against the cool silk. The entry angle suggests high velocity. 7.62 mm? My breath hitched. He wasn't disgusted. He was reading me like a dossier. 5.56, I corrected, my voice barely audible. Ricochet. It tumbled. Which mission? He asked. He didn't ask, does it hurt? He didn't ask, poor thing. He asked for the logistics. Operation Blackbriar. Eastern Europe, I answered, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. We were compromised. I had to extract the asset alone. And you succeeded? I'm here, aren't I? He hummed, a dark vibration in his chest. Yes, you are here. His hand lingered on the scar, his thumb pressing down with just enough pressure to ground me. The storm outside faded into white noise. The only reality was the heat of his hand and the scent of him, smoke, rain, and danger. Show me yours, I whispered. It was a challenge, a dangerous one. Se-Hwan went still. His eyes locked onto mine, searching for fear. He found none. Slowly, deliberately, he undid the top button of his dress shirt. Then, the second, he pulled the fabric aside, revealing the hard expanse of his chest. There, running from his sternum to his left shoulder, was a burn. Waxy, jagged, and brutal. Fire? I asked, reaching out. My fingertips grazed the ridge of the scar. His heart hammered beneath my touch, a heavy, powerful rhythm. A car bomb, he said flatly. 10 years ago. Who was the target? Me. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable. My wife took the seat next to me. She didn't make it out. I went cold. The rumors said she died of a rare illness. They said she was sick. People say what I tell them to say, he replied, his voice devoid of emotion, yet terrifyingly raw. Sickness is a tragedy, a bomb is a declaration of war. I preferred the world to think I was a widower, not a soldier who got his own wife killed. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. That is why I am the silent fire, Makeda. Because when I finally retaliated, I didn't scream, I just burned them all. The thunder cracked again, louder this time, shaking the glass walls. But I didn't flinch. I was too focused on the storm in front of me. We were two jagged edges, broken by the same violent world. He looked at my lips. I looked at his. The air in the room grew thin. The magnetic pull was undeniable, a gravity that wanted to smash us together. He leaned closer. His nose brushed mine. I could taste the whiskey on his breath. My eyelids fluttered shut, my body leaning into him, craving the collision. He froze. For a heartbeat, I thought he would do it. I thought he would cross the line that would ruin us both. Then, he pulled back. He didn't step away, but he withdrew the intimacy. He adjusted my strap, covering the scar on my shoulder, his touch lingering for a fraction of a second too long. Go back to your room, architect, he whispered, his voice rough like gravel grinding on glass. He stepped back, picking up his drink, turning his back to me and the lightning. Go, he commanded, his back rigid. Before I forget, you are an asset and start treating you like a vice. I stood there for a moment, breathless, my skin burning where he had touched me. Then, without a word, I turned and walked into the shadows, leaving the dragon alone with his fire. The gown was a deception. To the photographers blinding us on the red carpet, it was a masterpiece of midnight blue liquid silk, draped to accentuate every curve, slit high up the left thigh. To me, it was tactical webbing. The fabric was heavy enough to conceal the outline of the 4-inch ceramic blade strapped to my upper leg. The diamond clutch in my hand didn't hold lipstick or a compact. It housed a high-gain RFID cloner and a signal jammer. I wasn't a date. I was a Trojan horse. Smile, Se-Hwan murmured, his voice a low vibration against my ear. His arm was wrapped around my waist, his grip possessive, immovable. The sharks are circling. Let them bite, I replied, keeping my face serene, my eyes scanning the perimeter. I have a jammer that can disable their pacemakers. Se-Hwan made a sound that might have been a laugh if he were a lesser man. Ruthlessness looks good on you, Makeda. We entered the grand ballroom of the Shilla Hotel. The air hit me first, a suffocating cocktail of expensive French perfume, ozone, and the metallic tang of chilled champagne. 1,000 eyes turned toward us. The silence rippled outward from the door like a shockwave. The dragon of soul had arrived, and he had brought a mystery. I felt the whispers crawling over my skin. I analyzed the threats, 3 bodyguards near the buffet, clearly armed. A diplomat in the corner, sweating too much. And the women, looking at me with a mixture of envy and disdain, wondering how a woman with my skin tone and no family crest had ended up on the arm of the city's king. Ignore them, Se-Hwan commanded softly. They are scenery. I never ignore variables, I corrected. We moved through the crowd. Se-Hwan didn't part the sea parted for him. Men bowed. Women preened. He acknowledged them with microscopic nods, cold and distant. Then, the water turned turbulent. A man stepped directly into our path. He was older, with silver hair slicked back and a smile that didn't reach his reptilian eyes. Director Choi. The public face of a logistics empire, and, according to the files I had decrypted that morning, the silent financier of the Viper clan. Se-Hwan, Choi boomed, extending a hand. His palm looked damp. I didn't think you'd make it. The city has been so volatile lately. Volatility creates opportunity, Director. Se-Hwan replied smoothly, ignoring the hand. Choi's smile faltered, then twitched. He turned his gaze to me. He looked me up and down, lingering on the slit of my dress, his expression shifting from curiosity to open mockery. And who is this? Choi asked, swirling his wine. I wasn't aware you had expanded your import business. She's certainly distinct. A bit exotic for a boardroom, isn't she? Or is she just for the after-party? The insult hung in the air, gross and heavy. He was calling me a prostitute, a trinket. Se-Hwan went rigid. The temperature around us dropped 10 degrees. I felt the muscles in his arm coil ready to strike. But I didn't need a protector. I needed a target. I stepped forward, closing the distance between Choi and myself. I smiled, a sharp, terrifying expression that mirrored the blade on my thigh. Director Choi, I said, my voice smooth as velvet but loud enough to be heard by the surrounding circle. It's an honor. I was just admiring your contribution to the Children's Hope Fund tonight. Choi blinked, confused by the pivot. Yes, generosity is a virtue. It certainly is, I continued, taking a step closer, invading his personal space. I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, but pitched it perfectly so the 3 men behind him could hear. Especially when that generosity is funneling through the Blue Heron Shell Company in Macau to hide the $20 million you embezzled from your own shareholders last quarter. Choi's face went ash gray. His wine glass tilted, threatening to spill. I don't know what you. Ledger 4, row 12, I recited, my eyes locking onto his dilated pupils. I saw the transfer protocols this morning. You missed a decimal point in the laundering code. Sloppy work, Director. If the tax authorities or your partners found out you were stealing from the pot, well, volatility, as Se-Hwan says. I reached out and patted his cheek. He was too paralyzed to move. Enjoy the party, Director. Try the shrimp. I hear it's the last rich meal you'll be having for a while. I stepped back, slotting myself perfectly against Se-Hwan's side. Choi looked like he was having a stroke. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He turned and fled toward the exit, his cell phone already at his ear, panic radiating off him in waves. Silence. I looked up at Se-Hwan. He wasn't angry. He was looking at me with a dark, blazing intensity that made my knees weak. It wasn't just desire. It was pride. Lethal, arrogant pride. He shifted his grip, his hand sliding down to rest heavy and possessive on the curve of my hip. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. I was going to break his hand, Se-Hwan whispered. But you just broke his spine. He looked at the crowd, at the people staring at us with renewed fear and awe. Careful, everyone, he said, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. My partner doesn't just bite. She erases. He pulled me closer, guiding me toward the center of the room. Dance with me, architect, he commanded. We have a victory to celebrate. For exactly 45 minutes, I forgot who we were. The morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling glass wasn't harsh. It was golden, diffused by the lingering humidity of last night's storm. There were no alarms, no scrolling code, just the smell of Blue Mountain coffee and the sound of a page turning. I sat at the kitchen island, wearing one of Se-Hwan's white dress shirts. It swallowed my frame, the cuffs rolled up to my elbows. It was a cliché, I knew, the female lead wearing the hero's armor. But in that moment it felt like a flag of truce. Se-Hwan stood by the espresso machine. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, just the vest and trousers. He looked at me over the rim of his cup. His eyes, usually scanning for threats, were soft. He looked human. "You sleep quietly," he noted, his voice rough with morning silence. For someone with so much noise in her head. I felt safe, I admitted. The truth slipped out before I could vet it. He set the cup down and walked toward me. He didn't stop until he was standing between my knees, his hands resting on the marble counter on either side of my waist. "Dangerous," he murmured, leaning in. "Safety makes you slow, architect. Maybe I don't want to be fast today," I whispered, tilting my head back. He lowered his head. His lips were an inch from mine. The air was heavy, sweet, and terrified of breaking. Then, the elevator doors blasted open. The sound was a gunshot in a library. Se-Hwan pulled back instantly, the softness vanishing, replaced by a mask of granite. Kang, his chief of security, marched into the room. He was a bull of a man who had hated me from the moment I arrived. He was flanked by 2 armed guards. He didn't bow. He threw a thick, brown dossier onto the marble island. It slid across the surface and hit my coffee cup, spilling dark liquid onto the white, pristine counter. "We found the leak," Kang spat, his eyes burning into mine. Se-Hwan didn't look at the folder. He looked at Kang. "Explain." "The server breach last week. The intel regarding Director Choi. It wasn't an analysis, sir. It was a trade." Kang pointed a thick finger at me. "She didn't find the data. She was fed it. By her handlers." My blood ran cold. "That's a lie." Se-Hwan opened the folder. I watched his face. I watched the light die in his eyes. He pulled out a photograph. It was grainy, taken from a long-range surveillance lens. It showed me, standing in an alleyway in the Itaewon district 2 days ago. I was handing a flash drive to a man. I recognized the man. It was Agent Miller, my old handler from the agency. "That's—" I stuttered, my brain misfiring. "That's impossible. I haven't seen Miller in 3 years. That image is doctored. Check the pixel density. Check the shadows." "We did," Kang sneered. "It's clean. And so is this." He slapped a bank statement onto the counter. A deposit receipt. $500,000 wired to an account under the name Elias Wilson, my dead husband's alias. "She's a double agent, sir. She used the debt as a cover to infiltrate. She's been feeding our logistics to the agency and selling our weaknesses to the Viper clan." "No," I said, my voice rising. I grabbed Se-Hwan's arm. "Se-Hwan, look at me. This is a frame. It's too perfect. Why would I use Elias's name? It's a setup." Se-Hwan looked at my hand on his arm. He looked at it like it was a venomous snake. He shook me off. The motion was violent, sending me stumbling back against the bar stool. He looked at the photo again, then at me. "You told me you were cursed," he said. His voice was no longer a rumble. It was a void. A cold, airless vacuum. "You were right. Se-Hwan, please." Click. The sound stopped my heart. Se-Hwan had drawn his weapon. A matte black semi-automatic. He raised it, leveling the barrel directly at the center of my forehead. The room went silent. The guards shifted, hands on their holsters. Kang smiled grimly. I stared down the barrel. I saw the rifling inside. I saw death. But mostly I saw Se-Hwan's eyes. They weren't angry. They were empty. The look of a man who had finally allowed himself to believe in something, only to have it rot in his hands. "I burned a city for you," he whispered. The gun didn't waver. "I let you into my code, into my home, into my head." "I didn't betray you," I said, tears hot and stinging in my eyes. "I didn't beg. I stated a fact. If you pull that trigger, you are killing the only person in this room who is actually loyal to you." His jaw tightened, the tendon in his neck strained. For the first time in the legend of the silent fire, his hand trembled, just once. A microscopic failure of nerve. He couldn't do it. He lowered the gun. "Get out," he rasped. "Sir?" Kang protested. "Protocol dictates." "I said get out." Se-Hwan roared, the sudden explosion of rage making the glass walls rattle. He turned his back on me, slamming the gun onto the counter. "You are exiled, Makeda. You leave with nothing. The clothes on your back. No tech. No money." He stared out at the city, his back rigid. "If I see you in Seoul after sunset, I will do what I should have done the moment we met." 2 guards grabbed my arms. They dragged me toward the elevator. I didn't fight. I watched him. I watched the man I had started to love turn into a statue of ice. Se-Hwan. I screamed as the doors closed. "Check the metadata. Check the shadows." The doors sealed with a hiss. They threw me out the service entrance. I landed on the wet asphalt of the back alley, the knees of my jeans, my old dirty jeans they had dug out of the trash, scraping against the pavement. It was raining again. A cold, miserable drizzle. I had nothing. No phone, no wallet, no weapon. Just the taste of betrayal and the phantom feeling of cold steel against my forehead. I stood up, shivering, wiping the mud from my hands. I looked up at the penthouse, a distant light in the gray sky. I started to walk, my mind reeling, replaying the scene. The photo, the bank account. It was flawless, too flawless. Why now? Why today? I stopped. The rain plastered my hair to my face. My analyst brain, dormant during the heartbreak, suddenly rebooted with a violent snap. Kang. Kang had brought the dossier. Kang had bypassed the internal vetting protocols. Kang had been pushing for me to be removed since day one. And the photo? The shadows were wrong. The light source in the photo was from the west, but the alley in Itaewon runs north-south. It was a deepfake, a high-level one. Why go to such lengths to frame me? Why not just kill me? Because Se-Hwan would have investigated a murder. But a betrayal? A betrayal blinded him. It made him irrational. It made him isolate himself. They didn't exile me to destroy me. I looked back at the fortress on the hill. They removed the architect so the castle would be defenseless. "Oh God," I whispered, the realization hitting me harder than the rain. The Viper clan wasn't attacking his servers. They were inside his walls. Se-Hwan wasn't the executioner. He was the target, and I was the only one who knew it. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have a phone. But I had 10 fingers and the source code for the city's municipal grid stored in my memory palace. 2 hours after the exile, I was in a neon-drenched PC bang in the underworld district of Gangnam. The air smelled of stale smoke and instant ramen. The kid at the counter didn't ask questions when I dropped a gold cufflink, stolen from Se-Hwan's shirt before I left, onto the desk. "Terminal 4, he grunted. I didn't browse the web. I accessed the dormant ghost cache I had buried 3 years ago in a locker at Seoul Station. A Sig Sauer P226. 2 spare mags. A ceramic combat knife. A tactical vest. I wasn't Makeda the art restorer anymore. I wasn't the woman in the silk dress. I was the architect. And I was going to work. The rain had turned into a deluge. I lay prone on the roof of the commercial tower opposite Se-Hwan's estate. Through the magnified lens of a stolen surveyor's scope, I watched my theory bleed into reality. The gates didn't force open. They slid open. Kang stood at the perimeter. He wasn't defending the castle. He was welcoming the invaders. 3 black vans rolled in, spilling men with Viper clan tattoos and suppressed submachine guns. "Checkmate," I whispered, the rain dripping off the rim of my black baseball cap. They were going for the kill. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel vindication. I felt the cold, rhythmic ticking of a clock. Se-Hwan had maybe 10 minutes before they breached the penthouse. I dropped the scope. I sprinted for the edge. The front door was suicide. The service elevator was locked down. But I knew the blueprints. I had memorized the fact schematics the first night I couldn't sleep. the external ventilation shaft on the north face. It was a straight drop to the mechanical room behind the penthouse kitchen. Tight. Dangerous. Unguarded, I rappelled down the slick concrete face of the building using a coil of industrial wire I'd looted from the maintenance closet. The wind whipped at my body, trying to peel me off the wall. I reached the vent. Kicked the grate. It gave way with a screech of metal. I slid inside. Dust. Grease. Darkness. I crawled on my elbows, counting the meters. 20. 10. 5. I reached the vent cover. Through the slats I saw the kitchen. It was empty, but I heard the gunfire. Not the pop-pop of handguns, but the ripping sound of automatic fire. I kicked the vent out and dropped to the floor. Silently. The penthouse was a slaughterhouse. The pristine white marble floors were slick with red. Expensive art was shattered. Se-Hwan's loyal staff lay where they fell. I moved through the shadows, weapon raised. I didn't run, I flowed. Target left. 2 vipers guarding the hallway. I didn't waste bullets. I stepped out, blade in hand. The ceramic knife severed the carotid of the first man before he could turn. The second raised his rifle. I jammed the slide back, disabling the weapon, and drove my knee into his sternum, following with a hilt strike to the temple. He dropped. I took his flashbangs. I moved toward the office. The glass box. Inside, the Dragon of Seoul was dying. Se-Hwan was behind his overturned desk. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was soaked in blood from a gunshot wound to the shoulder. He was holding a pistol, but the slide was locked back. Empty. 6 men led by a laughing Kang were advancing on him. "You should have stuck to the shadows, Se-Hwan," Kang sneered, leveling his rifle. "The architect is gone. No one is coming to save you." Se-Hwan stood up. Even bleeding, even cornered, he was terrifying. He buttoned his cuffs. He grabbed a letter opener from the desk. "Then I will die standing," he snarled. Kang's finger tightened on the trigger. I pulled the pin. Clink. Hiss. The flash bang rolled across the floor, stopping at Kang's feet. What the bang? A blinding white light detonated in the room, accompanied by a deafening concussive boom. The vipers screamed, blinded, firing wildly into the ceiling. I stepped through the smoke. I was a wraith, a blur of violence. Double tap. Kang's lieutenant dropped. Pivot. I shot the man on the left in the knee, then the chest. Slide. I moved across the floor, grabbing a discarded rifle. Kang blinked, vision clearing, raising his weapon at me. I didn't hesitate. I put a bullet through his shoulder, spinning him around, then one in his leg. He collapsed, screaming. Silence fell. The smoke swirled around us. I stood in the center of the ruin, chest heaving, gun smoke curling from the barrel of my weapon. My tactical vest was smeared with grease from the vent. My face was streaked with rain and blood. I turned to the desk. Se-Hwan was staring at me. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the gun in my hand. He looked at my face. Shock. For the first time in his life, the dragon was speechless. He slumped slightly against the desk, clutching his bleeding shoulder. His eyes were wide, dark, and filled with a sudden, crushing realization of what he had almost thrown away. "You?" he rasped, his voice broken. "I told you to leave." I holstered my pistol. I walked over to him, stepping over the body of the man who had tried to kill him. I stopped in front of him. I reached out and wiped a smear of blood from his cheek with my thumb. "I don't leave a job half-finished, Se-Hwan," I said, my voice steady, cold, and absolute. I looked him dead in the eye. "And besides, you still haven't paid me for the varnish." We moved like a 2-headed wolf. Se-Hwan was bleeding heavily. The 9 minimal murmur round had passed through his deltoid, missing the bone but shredding muscle. He didn't complain. He leaned into me, his good arm wrapped around my waist, his weight heavy and hot against my side. I was his crutch, and he was my shield. We took the black Maybach, the only vehicle Kang's men hadn't disabled, and tore through the rain-slicked streets toward the Incheon dry docks. The server, Se-Hyun, gritted out, his face pale, sweat mixing with the blood on his collar. If Choi takes the ghost drive, he takes the city. The blackmail data, the grid codes, everything. He won't take it, I said, shifting gears, the engine roaring as I drifted around a corner. How can you be certain? I glanced at him. Because I touched it. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted iron and shadows. We abandoned the car at the perimeter and moved into the skeletal remains of Warehouse 9. The rain here was deafening, hammering against the corrugated tin roof like 1,000 drumsticks. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and wet rot. In the center of the cavernous space, bathed in the harsh glare of portable floodlights, stood the server rack. It was a monolith of black steel, humming with the lifeblood of Seoul's underworld. Director Choi stood next to it, surrounded by his elite guard. He looked smug, triumphant. He was typing on a laptop connected to the terminal. Decryption complete in 2 minutes, Choi announced, his voice echoing off the metal walls. And then, the dragon becomes a lizard. We stepped out of the shadows. Choi. Se-Hwan roared. It cost him. He stumbled, coughing, blood flecking his lips. I caught him, keeping him upright. Choi looked up. He smiled, closing the laptop. Ah, the lovers, Choi sneered. He pulled a heavy revolver from his coat, a silver monster that looked ridiculous in his manicured hand. He leveled it at Se-Hwan's head. I was hoping you'd come to watch. He gestured to the server. You built a magnificent empire, Se-Hwan. It's a shame you let a skirt ruin it. You got soft. You let a woman into your bed, and she let my men into your house. I let her in, Se-Hwan snarled, straightening his spine, fighting through the pain, because she is the only thing in this city sharper than I am. Choi laughed. She's an analyst. A calculator. What is she going to do? Audit me to death? He cocked the hammer of the revolver. Click. Say goodbye, architect. Watch your dragon die. Time slowed. I felt Se-Hwan's muscles coil. He was preparing to lunge, to take the bullet, to die so I could run. I didn't let him. I stepped forward, putting myself slightly in front of him. I didn't raise my gun. I raised my left wrist, tapping the face of my digital watch. You're right, Director, I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain. I am a calculator. I looked him in the eye. And you just failed the equation. I pressed the bezel. System override. Authorization. Architect. Protocol. Blackout. The hum of the server changed. It went from a low drone to a high-pitched scream. On the table, Choi's laptop screen flashed red, then black. Then the sound began. Every phone in the room, Choi's, his guards, the burner phones in their pockets, began to vibrate and shriek. What is this? Choi yelled, looking at his phone. My accounts. 0? What did you do? I didn't just fix the firewall in Phase 3, I said, walking toward him, the rain pounding on the roof above us. I installed a biometric dead man's switch. It's linked to my heartbeat. But it's also linked to my voice. I stopped 10 feet away. I just liquidated your offshore holdings. I sent the incriminating files on your embezzlement to the prosecutor's office. And? I pointed to the server. I just fried the cooling unit. That drive is melting. Smoke began to pour from the server rack. You have nothing, I whispered. No money. No leverage. No legacy. Choi stared at me, his eyes bulging. His empire had evaporated in 10 seconds. Panic replaced arrogance. He raised the gun, his hand shaking violently. I'll kill you. I'll kill you both. Se-Hwan. I shouted. I dropped to my knees. Se-Hwan didn't need a signal. He used my shoulder as a vault. He launched himself over me, a blur of black rage. Choi fired. Bang. The shot went wild, hitting the ceiling. Se-Hwan crashed into him. They hit the wet concrete hard. The revolver skittered away into the darkness. Se-Hwan was on top of him instantly. He didn't punch. He didn't strangle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the Mont Blanc fountain pen, the heavy black resin pen he had given me to sign the contract. The pen that had started this. You wanted my signature? Se-Hwan roared, his face a mask of primal fury. He drove the pen down, thud, into Choi's neck, right into the jugular. Choi gurgled, his hands grasping at the pen, his eyes wide with shock. "Consider it signed," Se-Hwan whispered. He twisted the pen. Choi went still. The silence that followed was heavy. The only sound was the hissing of the melting server and the relentless rain. Se-Hyun knelt over the body for a moment, chest heaving. Then, the adrenaline crashed. He swayed. "Se-Hyun." I scrambled over to him, catching him just as he collapsed. We fell back against the cold steel of a shipping crate. I pressed my hands to his shoulder wound, applying pressure. His skin was gray, clammy. He looked up at me. His eyes were hazy, struggling to focus. He reached up, his blood-stained hand cupping my cheek. He didn't look at the dead man. He didn't look at the burning server. He looked at me, the architect. He mumbled, a faint, delirious smile touching his lips. Did we win? I looked at the carnage around us. I looked at the man who had burned a city for me, and the man I had burned a fortune for. I leaned down, kissing his forehead, mingling my tears with the rain on his face. "The city is ours, Se-Hwan," I whispered. "Sleep now." His eyes fluttered shut. His head fell back against my shoulder. I held him in the dark, the Black Widow guarding her dragon, waiting for the dawn. The smell of industrial bleach used to cling to my skin like a second shadow. It was the scent of erasing mistakes, of scrubbing away the grime of a life I couldn't afford. 6 months later, the air in the penthouse smells different. It smells of white jasmine, fresh fountain pen ink, and absolute terrified silence. I sat at the head of the obsidian conference table. I wasn't wearing silk today. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, tailored so sharply it could cut glass. My hair was pulled back, revealing the small diamond studs in my ears, a gift from the man sitting in the shadows behind me. Across from me sat CEO Park, a man who controlled the shipping lanes in Busan. He was sweating. "I don't mean to be disrespectful," Park stammered, his eyes darting over my shoulder to where Se-Hwan lounged in a leather chair, nursing a glass of whiskey. "But I came to negotiate with the dragon. Not his secretary." The room went deathly still. Se-Hwan didn't move. He didn't speak. He just took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. He knew the rules. He knew who ran this table. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I simply tapped the screen of the tablet in front of me. The massive monitor on the wall flickered to life. It displayed a live feed of Park's private container yard in Busan. "Mr. Park," I said, my voice smooth and cold, "you are under the impression that you have leverage because of your union contracts. But according to my analysis of your digital ledger, which I accessed 3 minutes ago, your company is technically insolvent." I swiped the tablet. The screen changed to a bank transfer receipt. "I just bought your debt from the Cayman Holdings," I continued, leaning forward, interlacing my fingers. "Which means I don't need to negotiate with you. I own you." Park turned pale. He looked at Se-Hwan, desperate. "Se-Hwan, are you going to let her do this? You are the head of this family." Se-Hwan finally set his glass down. The sound echoed like a gavel. "You are mistaken, Park," Se-Hwan said, his voice low and rumbling. "I am the fire. I burn what is in front of me." He gestured to me with an open hand, a gesture of submission and reverence. "She is the architect. She decides where the fire goes. If she says you burn, you burn." Park scrambled out of the chair, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the table, before fleeing the room as if the hounds of hell were snapping at his heels. The heavy doors clicked shut. Silence returned. But it wasn't empty. It was heavy with the heat that always lived between us. Se-Hwan stood up and walked toward me. He moved with the same predatory grace, but the tension in his shoulders was gone. The scar on his chest and the one on my shoulder were the only reminders of the night we almost died. He stopped beside my chair, turning it so I faced him. He placed his hands on the armrests, boxing me in. Not a cage, a throne. Ruthless, he murmured, a smile touching his lips. You scare them more than I do. Efficient, I corrected, reaching up to adjust his tie. I just removed a variable. He caught my hand, bringing my knuckles to his lips. Then, he reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a diamond. He pulled out a heavy platinum signet ring. It was engraved with a new crest, a dragon coiled around a pillar. He slid it onto my finger. It was heavy, permanent. What is this? I asked. It's a master key, he whispered. It contains the NFC encryption for the entire syndicate network. The accounts, the servers, the safe houses, it's all on your finger. He knelt, the dragon of soul, on one knee before me. You aren't just my wife, Makeda. You are my architect. The city didn't just survive the fire. It was rebuilt in your image. I looked at the ring, then at the man who had given me the world. 6 months ago, I was scrubbing old paintings, trying to fix things that other people had broken. I was hiding in the cracks of the city. Now, I owned the city. I leaned down, kissing him, a kiss that tasted of whiskey, power, and a promise kept. I used to fix broken things, I whispered against his lips. Now, I decide what stays whole. And that, my fierce hearts, is how the architect conquered the fire. If you made it to the end, you are the true elite of this channel. I want to know, do you think Makeda went too easy on Director Choi, or was the pen exactly the justice he deserved? Drop a crown emoji in the comments if you're ready for the next story, or type Season 2 if you want to see Makeda and Se-Hwan take on the European syndicates. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. The night is dark, but we burn brighter. Until next time.
This was one of the best stories I've ever had in a long time. Great work.